Have you ever spent a small fortune on the brightest, most expensive bag of seedling mix, only to watch your precious plants still wither, get leggy, and just refuse to grow? If so, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're setting the stage for a true battle of the titans, store-bought potting mix versus DIY, homemade blends. We're going to dig much deeper than just the simple pros and cons. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will know the main secret that manufacturers of pre-mixed soil blends really don't want you to discover. And this secret won't just save you money and stress. Most importantly, it will give you robust, healthy seedlings. By the way, tell me right now in the comments, which potting mix do you trust? The commercial bags or your own DIY creation? I'm genuinely curious to see which side has more loyal fans. Before we kick off this showdown, let's define what an ideal soil for seedlings actually is. It's much more than just dirt. Think of it as the perfect starter home for a newborn plant. First, it needs to be light and airy, allowing those delicate roots to breathe and grow freely. We call this aeration. Second, it must be highly moisture retentive. That means it needs to soak up and hold water like a sponge, yet still drain away any excess so the roots don't rot or suffer from damping off. Third, it should be nutritious, but only moderately so. Think of it like baby food. It needs to be balanced, without the overload of adult fertilizers that can actually burn and harm the young plants. And finally, the most crucial point, it absolutely must be healthy. That means free of weed seeds, pest larvae, and disease pathogens. These four pillars, lightness or texture, water retention, nutrition, and sterility, are the essential criteria we'll use to judge our two contestants today. So the first contender in our ring is commercial potting mix. Its biggest draw is, of course, convenience. In the modern world, where time is our most precious resource, the ability to just walk into a store, grab a nice-looking bag, and start planting immediately seems priceless. There's no need to dig, mix, sift, or sterilize anything. It's as if the manufacturer has already done all the dirty work for us. The packaging boasts labels like ready to use, balanced formula, and ideal for tomatoes and peppers, promising us an easy path to a bumper crop. This is a huge psychological factor. We aren't just paying for dirt in a bag. We're paying to save time and effort, and for the illusion of a guaranteed result. For a beginner gardener or a city dweller who only has a couple of containers on the balcony, this option seems like the only possible and totally logical choice. But is everything really that simple and straightforward? Let's take a look inside that beautiful bag. So what's actually lurking behind the flashy packaging? The foundation of almost 99% of all store-bought potting mixes is peat. However, not all peat is created equal. Most manufacturers rely on light, fibrous sphagnum peat moss. It's light brown or reddish, extremely lightweight and highly fibrous. Its advantages are clear. It's sterile and excellent at retaining moisture. But the downsides are significant. It's nearly inert, meaning it has zero nutritional value, and it is highly acidic. To make it viable as a growing medium, manufacturers must incorporate amendments to adjust the pH, typically using something like dolomite lime or garden lime, along with a starter dose of mineral fertilizers. To improve the overall structure, they usually blend in perlite, those white styrofoam-like pellets that create aeration and drainage, or vermiculite, which is better known for its water retention properties. In premium or higher-end blends, you might find darker, nutrient-rich black peat and often earthworm castings, also known as vermicompost. The critical issue, though, is that we are never given the exact proportions or the quality rating of these individual components. We rely entirely on the manufacturer, who regrettably often cuts corners to save money. Let's take a moment to bust one of the biggest myths in gardening marketing, the myth of the universal soil mix. Seeing a bag labelled Universal Seed Starting Mix sounds tempting, but in reality, it represents a massive compromise. Think of it this way. Imagine trying to feed the exact same meal to a newborn baby and a competitive weightlifter. Chances are, neither one of them is going to thrive. It's the same situation with plants. For instance, pepper, tomato, and eggplant seedlings need a denser, more nutritious substrate. But tiny seeds like petunias or lobelia, which are surface sours and need light to germinate, require an ultralight, almost weightless mix, often based purely on sphagnum peat moss. Furthermore, brassicas, or the cabbage family crops, prefer slightly alkaline soil, while the majority of other common vegetables thrive in neutral or slightly acidic conditions. When you buy a universal mix, what you're really getting is a mediocre average that is optimal for absolutely no one. As a result, some of your plants will suffer from nutrient deficiencies, while others will be battling the wrong soil structure or acidity level. This compromise is the number one most common reason for seed starting failure. Let's discuss the number one hidden threat that most gardeners completely overlook: soil acidity, or pH. Imagine the plant's roots have a mouth that can only absorb nutrients when the soil's acidity is just right. For most garden vegetables, the optimal range is tight, usually between 6 and 7. If the soil is too acidic, this mouth gets blocked. The plant then begins to starve, even if there's plenty of food surrounding it. It simply can't absorb essential nutrients like phosphorus, potassium, and magnesium. The result: yellowing leaves, stunted growth, and weak spindly seedlings. Commercial producers are required to neutralize or lime the peat they use in potting mixes, but how well do they actually do it? Often, the packaging lists a very broad pH range, say 5.5 to 6.5, which is already far from ideal. In cheaper potting mixes, they either skimp on the liming agent entirely, or it's mixed unevenly. This means one corner of your seed tray might have perfect soil, while the other is highly acidic. Without specialized equipment, you can't test this, so all you see is the result: failing seedlings, and you never know the real cause. The second hidden threat hiding in a beautiful package is what we call empty peat, or nutritionally poor soil. As we've already established, the base of most commercial mixes is sphagnum peat, which is naturally low in nutrients. To compensate for this, manufacturers add a mineral fertilizer complex. But there are two main issues here. Firstly, this is often the cheapest complex available, designed only to meet the basic needs right at the start. As soon as your seedlings get a bit bigger and develop their first set of true leaves, this starter food runs out. The plants will have consumed everything and will begin to starve. We recognize this by the telltale sign of pale green, then yellowing, lower leaves. This forces us to start fertilizing immediately, risking scorching the delicate roots with an incorrect concentration. The second issue relates to the shelf life of the mix itself. If the bag has been sitting in a warehouse for a long time, especially exposed to heat or light, chemical processes inside continue. This can cause the nutrients to transition into a form that plants simply cannot absorb. Ultimately, we end up buying not a nutritious substrate, but merely inert filler material. The third, and arguably the most troubling threat, is contamination. You might assume that since the bag is hermetically sealed, the contents are completely safe, right? Unfortunately, commercial production processes are rarely sterile. A common hitchhiker is the fungus gnat, or sciarid fly. We often unknowingly introduce their eggs and larvae right into our homes along with the potting mix. While the tiny black flies themselves are mostly just annoying, it's their larvae in the soil that cause the real trouble. They happily munch on the delicate roots of young seedlings, severely weakening the plants and making them vulnerable to secondary infections. Another frequent issue is mold or mildew. If the peat moss or soil base was packaged too wet, the sealed bag creates a perfect humid environment for spores to thrive. You might open the bag to find a visible white or greenish fuzzy layer. Using that soil without first treating it with a fungicide is a huge gamble. Finally, the most dangerous threat is aggressive plant pathogens like damping off, sometimes called blackleg, and fusarium wilt. These serious diseases can survive dormant in low-quality soil components. For tiny seedlings, contracting these diseases is often a death sentence. The simple truth is, nobody can guarantee absolute sterility in commercially available potting mixes. Let's take a closer look at the fertilizer issue in commercial soil mixes. We usually face two extremes here. Either there's too little, or, worse yet, there's way too much. In cheap potting soils, manufacturers usually add a minimal dose of NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which only lasts for a week or two. The seedlings quickly use up this supply and start showing signs of nutrient deficiency. This forces us to begin supplemental feeding, which requires extra time and specific knowledge. More expensive soils often contain slow-release fertilizers. That sounds great. Plant it and forget it. But for tender seedlings, this can actually be disastrous. A high concentration of salts in the soil essentially burns the young, delicate roots, preventing them from absorbing water efficiently. Visually, it looks exactly like the seedlings are underwatered, even though the soil is perfectly moist. A novice gardener then tends to water even more, worsening the problem and often leading to root rot. This is especially dangerous for crops grown from tiny seeds, which need no fertilizer at all when starting out. They only require moisture and a loose, airy structure. Another crucial factor is the physical properties of the growing medium, namely its tendency toward compaction and clumping. High-quality potting mix must remain loose, porous, and well aerated throughout the entire seedling stage. However, cheap mixes, often based on low-grade peat with insufficient amounts of aerating agents, behave quite differently. After just a few watering sessions, the peat particles settle and compact, leading to the formation of a dense crust on the surface. This crust blocks essential airflow to the roots, and oxygen is absolutely vital for root development. Consequently, the roots begin to suffocate. Furthermore, this type of compacted medium becomes incredibly difficult to water effectively and evenly. Water either channels down the sides of the pot, leaving the main root ball bone dry, or it pools heavily at the bottom, which inevitably leads to root rot. You are then forced to constantly break up the surface crust, running the risk of damaging the delicate stems of your young seedlings. Ultimately, instead of providing an ideal home, we end up giving our seedlings a veritable prison, making it incredibly hard for the roots to penetrate, spread out, and thrive. Now let's crunch the numbers. At first glance, buying commercial potting mix seems pretty cheap. A 10-litre bag might only set you back a few dollars. But let's look at this at scale. If you're planning to grow 50 to 100 transplants, tomatoes, peppers, or eggplants, you're going to need a lot more than just one of those bags. The total expenditure can quickly become quite substantial. Now let's compare that to the cost of making your own mix. If you don't have your own, a basic bag of good quality topsoil is cheap. A large bag of perlite or vermiculite, enough to last you several seasons, is also priced very reasonably. Compost or vermicompost, worm castings, are typically the most expensive ingredients, but you really don't need much of either. When you calculate the cost per litre of your finished homemade mix, it almost always works out to be 2 or even 3 times cheaper than a comparable mid-range quality store-bought alternative. This means the initial investment in the base components pays for itself very quickly, especially if you start a large volume of seedlings every year. The long-term savings are truly undeniable. Okay, but what if you simply don't have the time or the resources to mix your own potting soil? Does buying a commercial mix mean certain failure? Not at all. Even mediocre store-bought soil can, and should, be significantly improved or amended. Think of this as your compromise option. First, you absolutely must check the moisture level. If the mix is bone dry, moisten it evenly and let it sit for a while. If it's too wet, spread it out on a sheet of plastic and let it air dry a bit. Second, focus on improving the soil structure. Even with a decent bag of mix, I always recommend adding about 10 to 20% perlite or vermiculite. This will make the mix much looser and airier, which your seedlings' roots will definitely appreciate. Third, enrich the mix. Add a small amount, around 10%, of quality worm castings, often called biohumus. This provides your seedlings with excellent live organic nutrition right from the start. And most importantly, disinfect it. Drench the soil with a solution of phytosporin or another biological fungicide. This introduces beneficial microorganisms that actively suppress the development of harmful pathogens. These simple steps will drastically increase your chances of success. Now entering the ring, we have our second contender, the DIY potting mix. Its philosophy? Absolute control. When you mix your own soil, you become the master of the medium. You know precisely what ingredients you're using and in what exact ratios. You oversee every single step, from selecting your base earth to sterilizing it and adding necessary nutrients. There are no nasty surprises waiting for you. No hidden pest larvae, no unexpected pH issues. You can custom tailor the perfect substrate to meet your exact growing requirements. Need a mix for tomatoes? You can load it up with nutrients. Growing petunias? You make it extra light and airy. You are free to experiment with components, discovering your own unique secret sauce that thrives specifically in your microclimate. Yes, it does require a little bit of time and some basic knowledge, but honestly, it's not nearly as complicated as it sounds. And the sheer satisfaction you get from seeing strong, healthy seedlings flourishing in your own custom-made mix, that feeling is absolutely priceless. So, where do we start when creating our own growing medium? It all begins with the base layer, the foundation soil. We have a few options here. The most accessible choice is usually your own garden soil. It's best to take it from beds that had good rotation crops, like cover crops or green manures, and where you haven't had any disease outbreaks. A critical rule: avoid taking soil from potato or tomato beds to prevent the accumulation of pathogens. The second option is turf compost, or sod soil. This is made by stacking layers of sod and allowing them to decompose for 1 or 2 years. This soil is highly structured and extremely nutritious. The third option is leaf mould. This is derived from fully decomposed tree leaves, ideally birch, maple, or linden. It's very loose and light, making it perfect for delicate seedlings. You could also gather soil from the forest floor under deciduous trees, what we call forest litter. The main rule for any foundation soil is this: it should never be heavy or clay-based. It must be loose, crumbly, and well-structured. And naturally, any soil taken directly from nature requires mandatory preparation before you use it. The single most crucial, non-negotiable step when preparing your own homemade potting mix is sterilization. I know it seems like a hassle, but skipping this step means risking your entire batch of seedlings. When you bring soil in from the garden or the forest, you're importing a whole host of unwelcome guests: weed seeds, pest eggs, and fungal disease spores. Our main goal is simple: eliminate all of them. There are several effective methods you can use. The most reliable method is heat treatment, also known as pasteurization. You can bake moist soil in the oven at about 190 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 90 degrees Celsius, for 30 to 40 minutes. Alternatively, you can steam it over a water bath for a full hour. This will kill nearly all the invaders. But there is one drawback. Along with the harmful microbes, you also kill off the beneficial ones. A gentler technique is deep freezing. You take the bag of soil and expose it repeatedly to severe frost, bringing it back inside to warm up in between cycles. However, this method does not offer a 100% guarantee. The third option is the chemical route. You can drench the soil with a mild potassium permanganate solution or specific commercial fungicides. After any hard sterilization process, you need to bring your soil back to life. You do this by reintroducing beneficial bacteria back into the mix using microbial inoculants, such as products like phytosporin. Once we've sterilized our base growing medium, the next crucial step is focusing on its structure. Even the best garden soil tends to compact easily when confined to the limited space of a container. Our goal is to ensure the mix remains loose, friable, and well aerated. For this, we turn to what are commonly known as soil amendments or aerating agents. The most popular and effective options are perlite and vermiculite. Perlite, which is essentially volcanic glass, makes the soil incredibly light and airy. It prevents compaction and significantly improves oxygen delivery to the roots. Vermiculite is a mineral that acts like a sponge. It absorbs excess moisture and then slowly releases it back to the plants. This protects them equally from both overwatering and drying out. These amendments are typically added in quantities ranging from 10 to 30% of the total volume of the mix. Coarse river sand can also be used as an aerating component, but it's crucial that it's clean and completely free of clay. Coconut coir is also an excellent addition. It is sterile, highly moisture retentive, and provides fantastic structure to the soil. Now that we have a healthy and well-aerated soil base, it's time to create a true feast for our seedlings. We need to add the nutrients. Unlike store-bought soils, which often contain questionable mineral fertilizers, we are going completely organic. The best component for this purpose is mature compost, or biohumus, also known as vermicompost. This is essentially the product of organic matter processed by earthworms. It contains a complete complex of nutrients in a form that plants can easily absorb. Furthermore, it introduces beneficial soil bacteria that improve soil health and boost the plant's immunity. You should incorporate this at a rate of 10 to 30% of the total volume. Another excellent alternative is well-aged manure, ideally having been composted for at least 2 to 3 years. Under no circumstances should you use fresh manure. It will definitely burn your delicate seedling roots. For a source of potassium and microelements, and to slightly adjust the pH balance, you can add wood ash, about 1 cup per bucket of mix. This type of organic feeding works gently and consistently, ensuring your seedlings get everything they need over the long term. Another aspect we have complete control over when mixing our own potting soil is the pH level, or acidity. As we know, this is a critically important parameter. Most of the components we use have their own pH characteristics. For example, standard garden soil can be acidic, neutral, or alkaline. Peat, if you choose to add it, is almost always acidic. To bring our final mix to optimal pH values, we use neutralizing agents. The most popular and safest option is dolomite lime, also known as dolomite flour. It not only normalizes the pH, but also naturally enriches the soil with essential calcium and magnesium. You can also use wood ash, but you need to be cautious with it, as it acts much faster and contains high levels of potassium. So how do you know if you need to adjust the pH? You can use simple litmus paper or specialized electronic meters. Alternatively, you can simply rely on your ingredients. If you add acidic sphagnum peat moss, then a neutralizing agent is absolutely necessary. On average, gardeners typically add 1 or 2 tablespoons of dolomite lime per bucket of soil mix. Let's start with our first and most popular potting mix recipe. We'll call it the all-purpose veggie mix. This blend is perfect for starting seedlings, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants and cucumbers. For the base, we start with 2 parts of prepared and sterilized garden soil or topsoil. Next, we add 1 part mature compost or high-quality worm castings. This will provide the essential nutrients. Then we incorporate 1 part soil amendment or loosening agent. This can be coarse river sand, horticultural perlite, or an equal mix of both. The perlite will keep the mix light and airy, while the sand helps it retain warmth and density. Make sure you mix all these components very thoroughly until the blend is completely uniform. Finally, for every 10-litre volume of this mixture, we add about 1 cup of sifted wood ash. This acts as a great source of potassium and trace minerals, and it will slightly buffer the pH of the soil. That's all there is to it. We now have a nutritious, perfectly airy and lively potting mix, ideal for almost all your vegetable crops. But what should we do about the fussier plants and those with extremely tiny seeds like petunia, lobelia and eustoma? Our universal recipe will simply be too heavy for them. They require an extremely light, airy and sterile environment so those tiny sprouts can easily push through the surface. For these delicate varieties, we're going to prepare a special, highly aerated blend. The base won't be regular garden soil, but high-quality, neutralized sphagnum peat moss, which you can easily purchase at any garden centre. We'll start with 2 parts of this peat. To that, we add 1 part horticultural perlite. Make sure it is perlite, not sand, because we need maximum lightness and drainage. Finally, to improve water retention and the overall structure, we add 1 part cocoa coir, coconut substrate, which needs to be pre-soaked and gently squeezed out. These seedlings require virtually no nutrients in the initial stage, so we skip adding compost or vermicompost entirely. The resulting mix is incredibly light, loose, and sterile. Seeds germinate perfectly in it, and the roots develop beautifully during that crucial first stage of life. Of course, even when you're mixing your own custom potting soil, it's easy to make mistakes. Let's go over the most common blunders we see so you can steer clear of them. Mistake number 1. Using fresh manure or immature compost. This is a guaranteed way to burn your delicate seedling roots and introduce a host of harmful pathogens into your soil mix. Mistake number 2. Incorporating too much clay or heavy, compacted earth. In this type of dense mix, your young roots will simply suffocate and die. Mistake number 3. Overdoing it with the fertilizer. Remember the golden rule for seedlings. It's always better to slightly underfeed them than to shock them by overfeeding. Mistake number 4. Using builder's sand or quarry sand. This material is too fine, full of impurities, and it actually cements the soil, making the mix hard and impenetrable. You must only use coarse river sand or horticultural grit. And finally, the most fatal mistake of all, skipping the sterilization or disinfection stage. Even if your base soil looks clean and healthy, this preparation step is absolutely mandatory. By dedicating just a little extra time to proper groundwork, you will save yourself months of labour and protect dozens, if not hundreds, of your future plants. So, as our showdown comes to an end, it's time to wrap things up. Who is the winner? The truth is, there's no single right answer, because each option definitely has its own specific niche. Store-bought mix is the quick and convenient choice, perfect for those short on time, lacking storage space, or only needing to plant a few things. However, it's always a bit of a gamble. To stack the odds in your favour, stick to reputable brands, and always make sure to amend the mix before using it. Homemade soil, on the other hand, is the choice of the serious, dedicated gardener. It provides total quality control, allows you to customize the mix exactly for specific crops, offers significant savings when dealing with large volumes, and ultimately results in healthier, stronger plants. If you're serious about your gardening and you want consistently excellent results, learning to mix your own soil is one of the most important skills you can master. It's a skill that will absolutely pay off. So what's the bottom line here? Store-bought potting mix is essentially a marketing product. It's convenient, it's fast, but it's often risky and unjustifiably expensive. Homemade soil, on the other hand, gives you complete control, guarantees quality, and ultimately results in stronger seedlings and a much richer harvest. And here's the biggest secret the manufacturers won't tell you. The actual production cost of even the most expensive, fanciest bag of potting soil is literally pennies. The bulk of the price you pay goes toward the flashy packaging, the logistics, and the advertising. The best, most vital, and nutrient-rich soil is already right under your feet, or in the nearest patch of woods. You just need to know how to properly source it and prepare it. Thank you so much for sticking with this video until the very end. If you found this useful and learned something new, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our future gardening secrets. And now, the big question for you. After everything you've learned today, has your opinion changed? Which soil will you be using this season? Are you still sticking with store-bought? Or are you going to take the plunge and mix your own? Share your story. and maybe even your own tried and true recipes down in the comments below. Let's exchange some priceless experience.